Welcome to some new r/malicious compliance stories, where people comply to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. I hope you had a great day. The first story is called Management Decisions. I'm a factory automation engineer with companies like Tesla on my resume. At my current factory job, shortly after I joined the company, I solved a problem that one of our processes had been having for literally the entire 20 years this factory has been standing. This was because my specific educational focus in engineering school was centered around exactly the kind of problem this process was having. I had permission from my direct supervisor and production management to implement a fix for this specific factory line. The other lines were running well enough without it that I didn't feel it was necessary to apply it across the factory. It was just this one line that went bad for whatever reason. So I fixed the problem I saw. I did this for about 6 months and managed to fix problems with literally dozens of different processes across the factory. All the while, I had no idea that there was a rule determined by our corporate engineering manager that all factory processes had to run on the same set of control parameters. We were forbidden from changing the parameters that I had been running around changing. I didn't know this was a rule, and I never thought to consider that it might be a rule, because it's an absolutely stupid rule. Process controls are supposed to be tuned individually to the equipment they are controlling. Every piece of industrial hardware is slightly different, even when the equipment is ostensibly identical. Without getting too technical, things like electric motors have subtle variations in the windings that make them respond differently to the current flowing through them. Heating units have slightly different thermal mass and other properties that make them heat up a little faster or slower. The automated controls for those processes have to use slightly different control parameters to account for these subtle differences in equipment. But apparently, this manager read about corporate standardization in a book somewhere and decided that every line across all of our factories needed to run the same controller constants. He had spent years in his own factory forcing his technicians to find a single set of parameters to work across all his lines. Apparently, he managed to find a set of parameters that didn't cause the equipment to catch fire. So in his infinite wisdom, he had spent the last 5 or 6 years shoving that mandate in the face of all of his technicians and subordinate engineers. Maybe so that he could report to his bosses that he had been putting the hammer down standardizing our processes. So in his eyes, I was messing up the whole factory by turning those controller constants to match the hardware they were running on. I tried to explain, that is not how any of this works. But I got about as far as that old lady in the commercial. So I cries to the manager's very explicit and stern demands to put everything back exactly the way it was supposed to be. I barely managed to avoid being fired on the spot by apologizing profusely for my mistake, because I didn't realize that there was a standard in place. Scrap and quality reject at our factory doubled in a single week. And we lost about 70 hours of uptime because of jammed up processes, at a cost of about $10,000 per hour in lost productivity. So there was suddenly a big meeting demanded by corporate. They came to yell at us for costing the company about $2 million in 1 week between all the increased scrap and downtime. In that meeting, I explained exactly the changes that I had been making to the processes over the course of the previous 6 months. I had charts from our historian for every single process before I made my original changes and after I made the changes. And for the time after I was compelled under threat of losing my job to rewrite all the changes I made back to the original parameters. I got the opportunity to explain to that engineering manager's boss that homogenizing code and standardizing processes is a good idea on the whole, but that there are specific equipment parameters that need to be tuned individually for each process they are running on, and that these parameters often need to be retuned if something about the process changes in a way that affects the performance of that process. Things such as changes in materials or natural wear and tear on components. And I explained that while one factory was able to find a set of parameters that worked across all their lines without causing catastrophic failures, most of those lines were actually performing quite sluggishly. And I demonstrated using our own plant's data how similarly performing lines at our factory before my changes dramatically improved yield and uptime when the processes were tuned individually. The corporate engineering manager got fired. I got 30% of my annual salary as a bonus this year, along with everyone at my plant getting maxed out bonuses because of how well the plant performed this year. The next story is called You Need Approval. I work in a law firm as a legal assistant. My boss doesn't like me. No clue why. She just doesn't. I'm not unconvinced the only reason I haven't been fired is that every attorney I support hardcore goes to bat for me. Now, one thing that infuriates me about their hiring processes is that they do not in any way, shape or form inquire about computer skills. We are, I guess you could say, tech adjacent due to the type of law we practice. But I've also interviewed at many other firms that require a typing test and some sort of Microsoft literacy test. I've come to be known as a computer whiz kid. I'm not even that great, I'm really just good with Microsoft products. My middle and high school were a bit obsessed with us having computer skills, so I was Microsoft certified at like 14 years old. And while a lot of knowledge base is gone, I still know my way around an Excel file. This is where I think my manager started to not like me. Within a month of me starting, I showed her multiple times how to do things. But this was all one-on-one training, not like I called her out in a meeting. She would show me how to do something, like say how to concatenate an Excel. I couldn't even tell you how she was doing it because it was so convoluted and cumbersome. I asked if I could show her how to do it the way I used to do it in other jobs, and she said yes. And then she was stunned when I did it in 2 minutes versus the half-hour explanation she had given me. This repeated itself with several other things, and finally I just stopped making suggestions because it became clear she didn't want to hear them. Cause why let someone help you become more efficient, right? As my attorney spread my skills to the rest of the firm, I was starting to be asked to help with other people's tasks so they were done quickly. Then other attorneys started telling their assistants to ask me for help. I never minded, as they always asked if I had time before just assuming I would help them. My manager got wind of this and had a meeting with myself and HR that I was doing unsanctioned and unapproved training. Her words, not mine. I brought up that people come to me, I don't seek them out, and she said, "But you need to run everything by me." I asked if I had to do that if it was a 30-second fix, and she said yes. Okay, you got it. So I did just that. Someone asked me for help fixing a document header. "Hey manager, is it okay if I show so and so this?" Someone asked me how to make Excel columns all the same size. "Hi manager, am I okay to help?" And to cover my bases, I copied HR. I wanted to show that I'm abiding by the rules. Multiple times a day. I'll have to give her credit, she lasted almost a month, but I was PTO 1 week. I was then told I'm allowed to assist others with Microsoft products without running it by her. By now, I'm not asked nearly as much to help. This is mainly because my knowledge has spread. I would never just do it for them. I would show them how to do whatever it was and send a follow-up email with the steps. She still isn't my biggest fan, but I can't say that I care. The third story is called A Letter for the CEO. I just came back from a great skiing trip with a bunch of colleagues. It was a short holiday in our private time and paid in full by anyone who joined the trip. In other words, it was a private trip with all attendees working at the same company. The youngest person in the group was fresh out of school, while others have been in key positions in the company for decades. The company I work for is a Dutch engineering firm with over 1,000 employees. This field of work is dominated by men. We are a professional yet very informal organization, where everyone addresses each other on a first name basis. Our former CEO was with us on the trip. Let's call her Kathy Johnson. Not only is she a great skier, but she is also a very outgoing person who loves to have fun and who hates pretentious behavior. By the way, the reason that she is not the CEO anymore but still works at the company is that we have a mandatory rule that requires the executive board to step down at the age of 55. The thought behind that is that the best performing, fresh-minded leaders are generally not people who are well past 60 years of age. On the day of our return trip, a 10-hour drive, we were carpooling, we had already vacated the hotel and went out skiing until well after lunchtime. While we were changing clothes out in the open in the car parking, she shared a great story. While she was the CEO, she received many letters addressed to the CEO, Mr. Johnson or Mr. C. Johnson. These letters were all based on the false assumption that the CEO of an engineering firm must be a man. She instructed her secretary to return every single letter unopened that addressed her as a man. The secretary, also a woman, loved doing that. She returned dozens of letters over the year, stating that there was no Mr. Johnson at our company. When I asked Kathy about the replies, she told me that the senders invariably either sent a second letter with profuse apologies or were never heard of again. The last story is called He Didn't Think This Through. I'm working in the billing queue in a call center for one of the big three telcos, and a client calls in regarding a billing concern. This lady calls in and is puzzled why she got charged a one-time fee of $49 for a wireless access point. She's even more puzzled why she would have that charge when she doesn't have TV services from us. I inform her that she does. It started more or less a month ago. She's disputing that because Optic TV isn't available in her area. Now I am confused. She lives in a small town and there's no Optic TV there. I do a little digging and find out that someone, now ex-husband, was still on the account and got a 3-year contract to get a free TV for Optic TV and internet. She begins to cry on the phone. She tells me her now ex-husband had an affair with a younger woman and divorced her. But he milked her for as much as he could and apparently still is milking her for more. He totally ghosted her. Moved to Alberta, changed his email, phone number, blocked her on all social media, etc. In my mind, I'm like, what a giant beehole. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, if you cancel the services, you're on the hook to pay for cancellation fees and so on. I can tell her though that I can remove his access to her account. And you can also add on a password, downgrade the internet and TV to the bare essentials, and I can attempt to redirect the TV gift from his address to yours. But there's no guarantee as it's been processed already. I can hear the light going off in her head. Wait, what? You have where he's living at now? Why, yes, he's got TV and internet services, so there's a service address. She goes really quiet, says her lawyer and herself have been trying to track him down, but his family and friends are being tight-lipped about it. She asks if I'm allowed to give that info to her. I smile and reply, this is your account. You have unrestricted access to service addresses, phone numbers and emails that your now ex-husband provided to us to get hooked up. She asks if I can give her his new address, his new cell number and the second number left on the account, presumably the new woman, and contact info over the phone right now. I asked if she had a pen and paper handy. She was so ecstatic. After giving her all the details from her account regarding the second service address, we downgraded everything. He was a hockey fan and there was a game playing right now with his team. So I wish I could have been a fly on the wall when the game cuts out and he calls in to ask what happened. Only to discover that he's been removed and there's an account pin and he's been discovered by his ex-wife and her lawyer. And with that, we end today's video. Let me know what you think about the stories. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the stories and today's video? I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. And I hope you have a great day. Stay safe. Bye bye.